videos for the next few months are probably going to feature me very layered up because I have little to no tolerance for the cold. My skin can't take it. I am a little whiny bitch when it comes to cold weather, which is funny because I was born in the winter, so you'd think I would be better suited to it, but I was born in the winter in San Diego County, so ew. So today I wanted to talk about this book, Spirit by J.P. Hightman. I read this, I think I started on the eve of Halloween and finished it on Halloween. You may have heard in my other videos, I did not have a fantastic reading month for the month of October, which was a bummer, but you move on. I did read some good ones. I just was struggling to find one that really amazed me. So when Halloween came, I was kind of craving something just I just needed that good ghost story. And so I completely forgot about this one on my shelves and figured, oh, it's short. I can read that through to Halloween. And so I picked this one up and figured it'd just be a cute little ghost story, and it ended up being really good. It's funny when you sound shocked when you pick up books from your shelves and you're like, oh my god, it didn't suck. That sounds kind of bad. But yeah, no, I ended up really liking this. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit today because when I looked up J.P. Hightman, I think he also goes by Jason Hightman. His books don't seem to be largely talked about. They're not largely available on Amazon. They're just, I don't know, they're strangely kind of tough to find. I don't know why, but I got this one on Book Outlet, I think. And when I looked it up the other day, they have a whole bunch of them right now. I think it's like one of those ones where they have 100 plus, and you can get it in hardcover like I did, I think. And right now it's either like $1.99 or $2.99, something like that, which is actually less than I paid for my copies. So if you watch this and end up thinking, oh well, that sounds actually kind of interesting, I would jump on the Book Outlet thing, which I will link down below if it's still up there. So anyway, what is this book about? This is, you wouldn't guess it from the cover, but this is actually a Christmas, well, it's not a Christmas story, but it takes place during Christmas. It starts in the Salem witch trial days, and that's the origin of the ghost story that takes place in here. And then it sort of fast forwards to Victorian times. And in Victorian times, we meet Tess and Tobias Goodraven, who, they're both 17. They're a married couple, which you don't read a lot of 17-year-old married couples in books, so I thought that was kind of cool and interesting. But Tess and Tobias, they both lost their parents in the same theater fire, which, you know, what are the odds to meet your spouse that way? But yeah, when they were kids, they lost both their parents in the same theater fire and got to know each other that way, bonded that way. And then they got sort of separated when they were kids, when Tess went off with one of her surviving relatives, and Tobias went to live with his uncle. And then Tobias grows up, the uncle dies, Tobias inherits the family estate and proposes to Tess. She moves in and they have the nice little cushy life. They become Victorian ghost hunters and get very into the paranormal and Victorian spiritualism and that sort of thing. And the problem I had with Tess and Tobias is, in the beginning, they didn't sound like a married couple. They sounded way more platonic. They get better as the story progresses, but in the beginning, they sounded way more platonic or brother sister like than you would expect from a married couple. I don't know, there was just this, maybe because they were so young, it just struck me that way. But no, they get better. That was one thing I did like about this story, is you do, for such a short story, you do come across a lot of character development in a really short amount of time. Because in the beginning, Tobias is, he's kind of cute in his own way, but he's also kind of irritating, because in the beginning he he's one of those guys that throws around the bravado, and he always tells those jokes and punchlines that never quite fall right. Everybody's around him going, no, that's okay, yeah. And his wife is always a little bit embarrassed about him. She always seems to be an instant away from a facepalm around him. But they make an interesting couple because they're both, what do you call them? I guess empathetics. They both pick up on people's emotions really easily, which is one thing that interests me because I've always had a thing with that where people can be around me and not say anything to me, and I can instantly pick up on a person's mood, or it doesn't take a lot with me. I think that's why it's hard for me to be in crowds a lot, or it's hard for me to bond with people sometimes, because I can pick up when somebody's hiding something from me. I can pick up when somebody is in a bad place in their head and they're not talking about it. I don't know, I hate to say things like I pick up on people's energies, because that sounds very like happy hippie to me, but it's kind of like that, where when people are it's usually the bad emotions. When people are very sad, when people are very angry and they're trying to hide it, it makes me physically uncomfortable. Like I can honestly feel it. When people are sick, I pick up on it. And so I was very interested in that part of the story. As far as the ghost hunting, Tobias is very like, he acts like he craves it. He wants to go out all the time, and he's always looking for the next rush. And Tess is more scared. She's always worried about what job is going to be the job that pushes them too far or endangers them too much. So they do make an interesting couple, even though it takes them a while to grow into something that sounds like an actual married couple. But the ghost story in here is kind of a cool concept, because it talks about during Salem days, there was, at least in this storyline, there was a witch that the Salem people were calling the first accused, because they had this woman that they suspected was a witch that somehow managed to escape persecution for a lot of that period. And then when they finally did catch her, there was a rumor that maybe she didn't quite die or maybe she put a spell on herself that brought her back. And then there's also a tie that they think this spirit that they're chasing is the widow Malgor, which sounds like such an evil character name, Malgor. And the widow Malgor had a daughter that was also suspected of being a witch, that had fallen in love with a German immigrant. And the widow Malgor was not a fan of him, but the daughter was madly in love with this guy. I think she was thinking of eloping with him, and it turned into this big nasty thing where they were supposed to meet up, and then the widow Malgor stopped them, and then everybody was rounded up, and the widow and her daughter were hung as witches, and then the boy was hung for associating with witches. And so there was this big curse put on the area, but they don't really know if like the mother did it or the daughter that was killed did it, but there's just this big curse of nastiness in the area. And so Tess and Tobias are called in to investigate the story, see how much of it is true, how much they can turn around, if they can put the spirits at peace, that kind of thing. And it turns out to be way nastier than they ever imagined, because the widow Malgor turns out to be a nasty, nasty creature. She's not even, by the time they discover her, she's not even human pretty much anymore. She's just this demon creature that has just remnants of human-like qualities, but mostly she's just animal and demon and soulless, basically. She's just feeding off of revenge and bloodlust and just nasty creature. And surprisingly, for such a short book and for being, this is actually put out by Harper Teen, so for being a YA novel, this got kind of violent and graphic and gruesome, which was cool for a Halloween read, because I hadn't had that in anything else I had read this month. So it was fun. I hadn't really gotten into too much horror and scary bits. But the thing with this is I really liked the prologue. The prologue, honestly, it's only a couple pages long, but just the image it put in my head actually made me feel like my heart stopped for a second. Salem Woods, 1892. Winter breathed upon her. The morning was cold, as it had been yesterday and the day before that. The girl's coat was not thick enough, but she said nothing to her father. His job was to inspect the rails before the train from Salem to Blackthorn went through for the first time in ages. He had taken her along because his wife had passed on, and there was no one to watch over the honor of a 15-year-old girl, and he disliked the rough young men eyeing her at the bakery when she'd bought a meager breakfast. She was unhappy, but did not complain. She could ensure he'd finish the task, for he was known to be lax, a wanderer, fond of whiskey, who could not hold employment. They were lucky to have any money in their pockets. 1892 had been a hard year with little to look forward to. Truth be told, the two of them could wander off into the landscape and never return, and no one would be surprised. They were completely alone on the rail bed that ran along the snowy forest, joined only by the sound of his long metal cane tapping the tracks. She wandered a few feet into the woods after an animal, perhaps a deer, though it seemed larger, some dark thing moving among the snowdrifts in this bitter patch of wilderness not far from Blackthorn. It was low to the ground like a shadow, and slipped with terrible silent grace beyond view, the feathery snow and the trees conspiring to create a veil. It was then that she noticed the tapping had ceased. When she turned, she saw her father had stopped. His gaze seemed fixed upon her, and even at this distance she could see that his face carried no expression whatsoever. For a very long moment, unsure of his meaning, she simply returned his look, drawn mysteriously into a sense of growing fear. She glanced behind her and saw no threat that could have taken his attention. He had about him a completely alien intensity, a predatory aspect, as when a dog stiffens before moving into attack. He carried the metal cane in one hand, and he remained motionless, even as his eyes were still unblinking. "What have I done?" she thought desperately. But she could think of nothing. She called to him, but he gave no reaction at all. He stayed unmoving for so long that finally she began plodding towards him, her feet stinging with the cold and worn-down boots. Stopping not a foot in front of him, she saw a foreign presence in his eyes. A blue smoke drifted across his pupils as if he were somehow burning within. Then something changed in the air, and his head turned to the forest as if recognizing some new arrival she could not see in the snow flurries. A crackling sound cut across the woods, and just for an instant her father was overcome with white vines of electricity, as if he were covered by a luminous ivy that had grown up from the ground, but was gone again in a blink, leaving only a charred smell. His hand slowly came forward and took hers in an iron grip. She was suddenly aware of a thick azure mist rising from the snow among the tracks. Again she spoke urgently to her father, and again he said nothing. The mist dissipated around him. She wanted to scream but could not, and then, still saying nothing, he walked her calmly but firmly onto a great sheet of ice, a frozen lake that lay beside the tracks. They stood on the frozen waters together, and she asked him what was wrong, begging for an answer. He did not reply, but instead raised his metal cane above his head with a heavy grunt and then brutally brought it down onto the ice. She tried to run, but he held her to the spot. He cracked open the frozen lake and pulled her down with him into the icy black water. So I read that prologue and was picturing this girl on the ice with her father, and her father clutching her hand, not letting her go, and then having to go down with her father in the ice, and him bringing her to her death and drowning and everything. That image just shot through my heart and just oh. And so when I read that, I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be good. And then it slowed down a little bit, the first few chapters, and it seemed like Tess and Tobias were on this train going to this festival in Blackthorn where they were going to investigate the story of the Malgore widow. And for the first few chapters, it seemed like this train ride was taking forever. And then I realized, oh, the story is the train ride, because the Malgore witch ends up making the train wreck. And she uses the train wreck to split up Tobias and Tess because they're less powerful when they're split up. And so she ends up attacking them and the groups of people they're with individually. It's just violent and creepy, and there's really intense descriptions that really propelled me along in reading. And so I started out after the prologue, the first 4 chapters or so, I'd say, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be probably like a solid 3 for me. And then a few more chapters in, it grew to a 4. And then like the very last chapter or 2, this thing turned into a 5 because I kept going, holy crap, because Hightman keeps giving you these visuals that are just creepy and chilling, and it impressed me because it's such a short book. It's like 215 pages, this whole book, but he gives you these visuals that just make you shudder. And it's funny because it's not anything, I mean, there are some gruesome parts, but the parts that really creeped me out were not the ones that were overly gruesome. It's the parts that are kind of quiet, and there's not a lot to them. It's just the way they're described gave me such a visual in my head that I went, ugh. And so that's why I got to where I was like, why do I not hear this guy's books coming up more? So I figured, hey, I would do a video and start talking about it a little bit. And actually, the cover of this book inspired a thought I had for a discussion video coming up. And I know people are like, she keeps talking about discussion videos. When have we ever seen a discussion video on this channel? I know. It's in my head to do one. It's just having all the reading done for all these videos. I tend to put up videos when I have my notes ready for each one, so that'll be coming up. But yeah, this sparked some things to think about, this cover, which I will get to later. Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this out. I will put the link to the book outlet listing below. If you like ghost stories and the witches and everything like that, this is a fun short read. And if you want to see more detail about what I had to say, I will also post my written review down below. So check this out, guys. It was a lot of fun, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye.